In this video, I want to talk about the fastest way to create really nice looking 3D screen effects right inside of DaVinci Resolve without having to use the Fusion page. This is going to be using my Whip 3D camera tool from the editor collection. Let me show you how it works real quick. In DaVinci Resolve, I'll throw the effect right above my clip, and then right away you can see it's going to zoom into the screen. If I turn on my Fusion viewer controls right here, all I have to do is click in the viewer, move this around, and I can change exactly how it's positioned. So now I can come from full screen and then go down to the 3D camera view, or I can edit these start controls as well. So if I move these around, zoom it in a little bit, and then change its angle, what I can do is start from a 3D position and have it animate to another 3D position. Really cool. So it has a lot more customization, including depth of field that renders insanely fast, especially compared to the built-in DaVinci Resolve versions, and chromatic aberration, scan lines, a bunch of cool stuff. So let's take a look. So you know how to add it in, you just have to drag it down, and then this has start controls and end controls, and by default it animates that across the entire duration of the clip. If you wanted to, you could come down to the anim engine, which is my custom system and all of the tools to handle the animations for you, so you don't need keyframes, and we could set this to be the standard mode, so that way it takes 1 second to animate between those two positions. Let's maybe set this to be something like a 3-second animation, and I'm just going to turn off the animation out, so that way it's not saying that the animation is too long. So now when we press play, it's a lot smoother and more gradual of an animation. And now we need to change this to make this look a little bit better. So going all the way to the beginning, it can be a little bit difficult to figure out which one of these is the start controls. Unfortunately, there's not any way for me to name that. So what you can do if you're at the first frame and you move one and it doesn't update, that means it's the end controls. But in this case, since it is moving, it is in fact the start controls. So let's move this around. We might want to zoom in a little bit more by changing the start distance, and then we can grab the start position to move it around and actually rotate it in 3D. And this is actually a real 3D camera behind the scenes. It's just set up so you can have some 2D controls to make it really easy to customize. But once we move this around, we also have this rotate slider, and as we move this, we can just add in some additional rotation. So I might put this to something like -30. I think that looks really good. And then let's bring this position down to something like that. And then for the end controls, let's come up here and grab the start distance and just copy this value and then paste it to the end distance, so that way it doesn't zoom out at all, it stays about the same. Then I'm just going to wiggle the end position to figure out which one this is, and I can move this, and we're going to keep this pretty much on the same spot, and then we're going to grab the end position and then just move this down a little bit like so. So now when we press play, we have a lot more smooth and nice looking animation. Now this easing is still too intense for me. I want it to be a lot slower and more gradual. So what we're gonna do is set the in easing to be sine as well as the out easing. So those are gonna be less intense easing curves, and we might wanna set this length to be something like 4 instead. When I press play, it's going to be a lot more smooth and a lot more gradual. All right, but the one thing that really makes your screen effects look good is depth of field. So let's enable that. If we come over to the depth of field option, we can enable this. And sometimes it takes a second or two to load in just because of the node that it's using behind the scenes. But once it loads in, it'll play back really well. And we can come in here and grab the start focus and then just bring this back and forth until it comes into focus. So let's highlight the cursor so that way that part's in focus. And then come all the way to the end. And we want to grab the end focus and make sure that this is still in focus here. So let's go right there. And now when I press play, you can see it's going to have some really nice depth of field, and it's going to do a focus rack between those two different points. We might need to update this end focus just a little bit more. And so as you can see, my playback is hesitating a little bit. Right now I'm getting 30 FPS. For me, I'm in a 4K timeline right now, and my playback is usually about 30 FPS even when rendering. So sometimes it'll drop below that a little bit, but sometimes it'll go faster, so I get real-time playback. On your system, you might want to come up to playback, come down to render cache and use user, so that way it renders it out, and then that way you can get good performance when you're actually editing. But once we have that set up, we can come down to the blur settings, we can increase the blur strength, we have the focus plane, so if I bring this way up, it's going to be a lot more of a shallow depth of field, and if I bring this back, it's going to be a lot more gradual getting to the more blurry parts of the image. In the blur quality, I would just leave it 6 unless you notice some artifacts and stuff like that you need to change. But now we can actually start adding in some of the other effects. We should go forward a little bit here. So when it's talking about the best editing pack for DaVinci Resolve, all of the suggested searches are really funny. But if we come down here, let's grab chromatic aberration and turn this on. The nice thing about chromatic aberration with screen effects is it gives that pixel look, but it's not quite complete unless you add in scan lines. So let's come down to the scan lines, enable this, and you see this adds in those like little individual pixels. And with these, you can play around with the scan lines amount, you can play around with the aberration strength to get this as close to looking like pixels as you can. And now when I press play, you can see that updates with the depth of field, and this just looks really nice. And honestly, I want this animation going until I stop typing. So what I'm gonna do is drag this out, and we're gonna move until I stop typing, and right as I press enter, so let's go right there. And now down in the anim engine, we can just press this end here button, and it's gonna update it so that way the animation is taking place in this entire time. All right, that is already looking really, really nice. But once I press enter, I want this to move to a different spot on the screen, because if I just disable this clip, you can see it's now going to be giving me the AI effects. And if I do the show more button, you can see it's going to show editor collection, which is pretty cool. So what we should do is actually split this right here, right when I do show more, and then move back to when I actually press the search. And that way we can just cut out all of that latency and then just shift this clip back. So now we get this. Or just presses enter, and then we can see the results right away. What we're gonna do is re-enable this video track, and then we're gonna split with 3D camera right here at this cut. Then what I'm gonna do is move forward just a little bit, and we're gonna press the end here button because we want this animation to happen quite a bit faster. And now what I'm gonna do is grab the end control, so let's move the end pivot and just move this over to where it has the editor collection video. I'm going to zoom it out a little bit, so drag up the end distance. We also have to update the focus so that way it remains in focus. And then we can move this pivot off to the side just like so, and just work on reframing that. And once we get that set up and press play, you can see it's not going to be a smooth animation, as the second version is going to be snapping back to the start location of this first clip. So what we can do inside of the second version is just press this match button, and if you watch all of these start controls, those are going to update to match the end controls from the previous clip. So that means when we press play, it's going to come to the end of the search, it's going to update, and then it's going to pan from that other location and have a seamless transition. And if we wanted to, we could have it start moving just a little bit sooner, so we could just shift the second version of whip camera over, and that way it starts animating before I'm done typing, and then that way we can get to the result pretty quick. Now on the second one, since the animation is a little bit faster, I do want some more intense easing on it. So I'm going to come to the ease out and set this to be something like Expo. And now when I press play, you can see it's going to come to a smoother rest at the end. And so as you can see, this looks absolutely amazing. It's rendering in real time with no caching right now. I do have a good system. So one thing you can do in addition to that render cache that I showed earlier is you can select both of these, right click, come up to render in place, and then just render these out as a ProRes file. And that way you'll get real time playback on any system. And then you can go through the rest of your edit nice and smooth. And like I said, this is part of my editor collection pack. If you guys do not already have that, it'll save you so much time, gets you access to this tool and a bunch of other awesome stuff that you can learn more about at the link down below. If you guys have any questions about this tool, let me know, and I'll see you in the next video.